A mother's love gone too far. Caroline had always dreamed of being a mother. When her son Bruno was born, after years of trying, her heart soared with happiness. She was determined to give him everything, pouring all her love into raising him. With her husband, Daniel, working long hours, Caroline often found herself alone with Bruno, creating a tight bond that felt special, almost too special. As Bruno grew older, he became overly attached to Caroline, as she was always around him. His father, Daniel, wasn't often home due to work obligations. By the time Bruno turned 3, even Caroline started noticing his unusual dependence on her. Bruno wouldn't play with other children in the compound. Instead, he followed Caroline around, tugging at her wrapper and demanding her attention. If she dared to sit with Daniel and laugh at one of his jokes, Bruno would stomp his feet, show his toys, and scream, "Mama, come back!" Daniel would often scold him. "Bruno, stop that! Behave yourself!" But Caroline always intervened. "He's just a child. Stop scolding him," she would say. "Caroline, you're encouraging this behavior. He's not a baby anymore. Let him learn some independence," Daniel argued. Caroline would brush him off with a laugh. "He's just showing how much he loves me. Don't be jealous." Daniel sighed. "A chick that stays too long under the mother's wings will forget how to fly. You must let this boy grow." But Caroline ignored his advice. One evening, as Caroline sat on her bed playing with Bruno, the maid walked in to take him for his bath. Immediately, Bruno started crying and screaming, "Mommy, I don't want her to bathe me. She always pinches me." Without verifying his claims, Caroline fired the maid on the spot. "Madam, you can't sack me like that. Your son is lying," the maid protested. "How dare you call my son a liar? Get out of my sight. I don't want to see you here tomorrow," Caroline shouted. From that day, Caroline took it upon herself to bathe Bruno every day. Their bond deepened as they spent time together, doing everything as a pair. They even slept on the same bed whenever Daniel was out of town. One fateful day, as Caroline was showering, Bruno demanded to join her. Without hesitation, she welcomed him into her arms. From that moment, it became their daily routine. They bathed together, dressed together, and lived like a couple. Caroline's unchecked love for Bruno began to manifest in troubling ways. While she saw no harm in their closeness, others noticed how unusual their relationship had become. Bruno started acting strangely, and the consequences of Caroline's overbearing affection were slowly unfolding. Bruno often pointed at his mother's body, asking endless questions about her 2 oranges and other parts. Caroline, his mother, found no reason to correct him. To her, it was a sign of a curious and intelligent child. One day, Daniel's mother, Mama Daniel, came to visit and was shocked by the unusual closeness between Caroline and Bruno. "What is this I'm seeing?" Mama Daniel asked sternly. "You shower with your son? Do you realize the danger in this?" "Mama, he's just a child. He doesn't even know the difference between right and wrong," Caroline replied defensively. "You are spoiling this child. This is wrong. Don't do something you will regret," Mama Daniel warned. From the living room, Caroline's husband Daniel chimed in. "Mama, tell her, I'm tired of talking." By the time Bruno turned 15, the innocent attachment that once seemed harmless had morphed into something disturbing. Bruno was no longer the shy boy who clung to his mother. He had become bold, aggressive, and territorial, especially when it came to Caroline. His teachers often complained about his behavior, particularly toward male staff. He challenged their authority, talked back, and even fought them. "He's just strong-willed," Caroline dismissed each report, ignoring the red flags. Bruno's possessiveness escalated. He began following his mother everywhere, whether to the supermarket or private meetings, glaring at anyone who spoke to her for too long. One day, their neighbor, Mr. Jones, casually remarked, "Ah, you look so adorable today, Moraine." Bruno's expression darkened. Before anyone could react, he lunged at Mr. Jones, shoving him against the wall. "Don't ever talk to her like that!" he shouted. Daniel rushed to intervene, pulling Bruno away. "What is wrong with you?" he yelled. That night, Daniel confronted Caroline. "Can you see it now? This boy is not acting like your son. He's acting like a man fighting for his wife." "He's just protective of me," Caroline insisted. "It's not as serious as you're making it." It is serious! Daniel slammed the table. He needs discipline, and you need to stop coddling him. But Caroline refused to listen. Instead, she deepened her bond with Bruno. When he began bringing her flowers and calling her my queen, she laughed, praising him for being sweet. Daniel grew increasingly frustrated. His warnings were ignored, and he felt powerless. At 15, Bruno was curious about everything, especially about women. Caroline often caught him staring at her with a look that burned deeper than mere admiration. When they were alone, he'd casually comment on her body, laughing off what seemed like innocent jokes, but Caroline felt a flutter of nerves each time. The situation worsened when one afternoon, while Caroline was cleaning, Bruno entered her room, holding a small notebook. He looked nervous and quickly tried to hide it. "What's that, Bruno?" Caroline asked, her curiosity piqued. He shrugged, refusing to engage further. Caroline's heart raced, sensing something wasn't right. Later, while organizing his room, Caroline found the notebook tucked under his bed. Her hands trembled as she flipped through its pages, finding his secret thoughts, words of desire and love that made her cheeks flush. One entry read, "My queen. No one can take her from me. I'll eliminate my father one day so I can spend the rest of my life with you." Conflicted, Caroline confronted Bruno. "You have some interesting thoughts in this notebook," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He stammered, "It's just how I feel, Mom. It doesn't mean anything." But the tension hung in the air, thick and palpable. The story explores the intense and unhealthy relationship between Caroline and her son Bruno, which evolves from a close mother-son bond to an alarming obsession, leading to conflicts with her husband Daniel and others around them. Forbidden Bonds, a tale of love and consequences. After some weeks, Bruno's feelings became harder to ignore. Their conversations danced around unspoken desires, and Caroline felt a mix of fear and excitement. One evening, while they sat on the couch, Bruno looked at her with intensity. "Mom, you're beautiful. I can't help but feel this connection between us." Bruno confessed his feelings. "Mama, I love you," he said softly. "Of course you do," she replied nervously. "I'm your mother." "No, Mama, it's more than that. You're the only woman I've ever loved." Caroline froze in shock. "What are you saying?" she stammered. Caroline felt her heart quicken. "Bruno, that's not something we should talk about," she replied. But her voice lacked conviction. Deep down, a part of her couldn't deny the spark that existed. But Bruno wasn't backing down. "Why do you keep pushing me away? I love you more than anyone else. Can't you see that?" His eyes were searching for hers, filled with something raw and powerful. "Love is complicated," Caroline whispered, feeling the electric charge between them. "We can't cross those lines." Yet, part of her wondered what it would be like to give in to that desire. As time passed, their encounters became heavier with unspoken words. Every brush of Bruno's hand against her arm sent shivers down Caroline's spine. One night, as they sat close together watching a movie, Bruno leaned in and whispered, "What if we let ourselves feel more, just for a moment?" Caroline's breath hitched in her throat. Could they? The thought both frightened and excited her. "We can't do this is so wrong." But Bruno smiled, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I'm not a little boy anymore, Mom. I understand my feelings." He moved closer, the warmth of his body radiating against hers. In that moment, Caroline felt trapped between her role as a mother and the woman she once was, full of desire. "Bruno, we need to be careful. This is all so risky." Yet fear still lingered in the back of her mind. "Bruno, you need to think about the consequences. What will your dad say or do?" Bruno brushed his fingers lightly against her cheek. "Let's not think about that right now," he coaxed, drawing her in closer. "Just feel." The air between them thickened with longing, their breaths mingling. It was as if the world outside vanished, leaving only the two of them and the heat of their connection. Caroline knew they were treading dangerous ground, but as Bruno leaned in, she felt a surge of wild excitement. As Bruno leaned in closer, Caroline's heart raced. The undeniable chemistry between them sparked with electricity, urging her to give in to desire. "Bruno," she breathed, torn between caution and longing. But Bruno's gaze was intense, filled with a passion that set her aflame. "Just for tonight, let's forget everything else," he whispered, his voice low and inviting. The moment hung in the air, thick with tension, as Caroline's resolve began to crumble. Before she could think further, Bruno pressed his lips against hers. It was soft at first, a gentle exploration that sent waves of warmth through her body. Caroline hesitated, but the taste of him, the sweetness of that moment, ignited a fire within her. Bruno wrapped his arms around her, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. Caroline felt her heart race as she surrendered to the moment, her hands moving to his hair, feeling its softness as she lost herself in the warmth of his embrace. It was intoxicating, a forbidden thrill that both exhilarated and terrified her. "Mom, this feels right," Bruno murmured against her lips, his breath warm and inviting. "I want to be close to you, in every way." His words ignited a fire of desire that coursed through her veins, pushing away all reason. They spent that night lost in each other, their affection bubbling over as they explored this new terrain. Bruno's hands traced down Caroline's sides, sending shivers through her body, igniting the passion she had buried for so long. They shared heated whispers and soft laughter, confined within the cocoon of their sanctuary, her home. As the sun began to rise, illuminating the room with a soft glow, reality crashed in. They lay tangled together, a wild mix of limbs and flushed skin, hearts still racing from their night of passion. Caroline's mind raced with conflicting emotions, joy intertwined with guilt, exhilaration mixed with panic. "Bruno, what have we done?" she murmured, brushing a hand through his hair as she tried to process their actions. This, this can't happen again." But Bruno pulled her closer, tightening his hold. "It feels so right, Mom. Why can't we have this?" His eyes searched hers, hoping for a sign of acceptance. "We can't. This is wrong, Bruno. We need to be careful. Your father," she murmured. "Forget him!" Bruno interrupted, his voice strong. "This is about us, not him. I love you." The weight of his words hung in the air, both terrifying and thrilling. Caroline's heart ached. She felt the gravity of their actions as a plea for something more emotional and physical intimacy entwined. Though they had crossed an irreversible line, a part of her rejoiced in this newfound connection, this passionate dance. Days turned into a continuation of secret encounters. They sneaked moments into shadows, exchanging whispers of endearment and soft kisses when no one was watching. Every stolen moment filled them with exhilaration and a sense of danger that only grew their desire. Even in public, a simple brush of their hands would send flutters of excitement between them. Caroline felt exhilarated being seen and desired by Bruno, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Their love blossomed in the secrecy of their stolen moments, a garden of affection hidden from prying eyes. But with each encounter, the reality of their situation pressed harder against Caroline's conscience. She loved Bruno deeply, but was constantly aware of the consequences. Guilt kept creeping in, reminding her of the lines they had blurred, the rules they had broken. One afternoon, as they sat in Caroline's room, wrapped in each other's arms, the door creaked open. It was Daniel, unexpectedly returning home early. "What the hell is going on here?" Daniel's voice boomed, freezing Caroline and Bruno in place. Caroline's heart raced, panic coursing through her veins. Bruno quickly jumped to his feet, unconcerned by his father's anger. "Dad, it's not what you think," he protested, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Daniel stepped further into the room, a look of incredulity washing over his face. "Not what I think? You're in bed with your mother. This is disgusting." His gaze shifted from Bruno to Caroline, betrayal etching lines of fury across his features. A family torn. Love, conflict, and healing. "Please, Daniel, let's talk about this," Caroline pleaded, rising to her feet as well. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet a fierce protectiveness for Bruno awakened within her. Bruno stood his ground. "No, Dad, you need to understand. I love her. There's nothing wrong with how we feel for each other." Daniel shook his head, disbelief in his eyes. "You're a kid, Bruno. You don't know what love is. You're confused. This isn't real." Bruno's fists clenched at his sides. "I'm not confused. I'm not a child anymore. What we share is real." He felt anger surge within him, fighting against the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "Stop this, both of you!" Daniel shouted, his voice trembling with authority. "You're ruining everything! How will people look at me and this family?" Caroline stepped closer to Bruno, instinctively reaching for his hand. "Daniel, please listen to him. But Daniel interrupted. "No, this is wrong on so many levels. You've betrayed me, Caroline." His face darkened, the pain evident in his expression. "I trusted you to be a mother first. How could you do this?" Bruno saw the hurt in his father's face and felt a pang of guilt. "I didn't ask for this to happen, Dad," he shouted defiantly. "Mom and we didn't choose to feel this way, but we do. You can't take that away from us." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of love and conviction. In that moment, Bruno knew he had to fight for what they had built together, even against his own father. "You think you can just dictate our lives?" Bruno continued, stepping forward, his voice steady. "I'm not going to let you bully us into pretending this doesn't exist. I love my mom, and there's nothing you can say that will change that." "Love doesn't look like this," Daniel spat, gesturing between them. "You're playing with fire, both of you, and it's going to get someone hurt." Caroline's heart pounded in her chest. "Daniel, please, let's just talk about this calmly. You're not listening." "Let the neighbors not hear this." "Calmly?" he echoed, his voice rising again. "How can I be calm when my wife is in a relationship with our son?" The room fell silent. Bruno's fists trembled slightly as he stood, ready to face the consequences. "I will not hide who I am or who I love," he declared, his eyes fierce with determination. "I won't let you tear us apart." Daniel's expression twisted in anger. "This is nonsense! You're both delusional! I can't let this continue!" "Then maybe you need to reevaluate what family means," Bruno shot back. "If you can't accept my love for Mom, then maybe you're the one who doesn't understand our family." The confrontation escalated, with emotions raw and tempers flaring. Daniel shouted, demanding they both leave the house, but Bruno stood firm. "No, I'm not going anywhere. This is my home too, and I have a right to be here, because I know who I love." In that heated moment, Caroline felt a surge of pride for Bruno's bravery, but also fear for what would come next. She reached out, wrapping her arms around Bruno, feeling their hearts beat together in defiance. However, the confrontation took a turn for the worse when Daniel, shaken but resolute, stepped back, his expression hardened. "I can't let this continue. I will not stand by and watch you ruin our lives like this." "You can't just dictate our feelings, Dad," Bruno shouted, frustration echoing in his voice. "You're not listening to me." Daniel's face twisted in pained anger. "Then maybe it's time for you to go somewhere far away. I think leaving this house, this town, would be best for you, Bruno. You need space to think," he argued, his tone brokering no debate. "What do you mean?" Bruno's heart sank, dread creeping into his chest. "Are you saying you're sending me away?" "Yes," Daniel said firmly. "I've arranged for you to study abroad. You need to distance yourself from your mother. This is for your own good." Bruno's world felt like it was collapsing around him. "You can't do this! You're trying to take me away from her!" "Maybe that's exactly what you need." Daniel's voice rose again, frustration spilling over. "This fantasy you have with your mother isn't healthy, and I won't let you be a part of it anymore." Caroline stepped forward, panic igniting in her heart. "Daniel, please, we can fix this. You don't have to send him away." She felt helpless, her worst fears coming to life. But Daniel refused to budge. "This is happening, Caroline. You've both crossed a line, and now it's time for Bruno to learn what real life is without that bond." His voice was unyielding, but Bruno's anger flared, and he felt tears of frustration welling in his eyes. "This isn't fair!" Bruno shouted, feeling betrayed. "You're tearing me away from the one person I love the most." The passion in his voice clashed with the heavy weight of reality. Daniel's expression softened for a moment, but hardened again. "You're a bright young man, and you've got so much potential. You can't waste it here like this. Going abroad is what's best for you, far away from the distractions." Caroline felt her heart break at her son's anguish. "Bruno, please understand," she urged, her voice trembling. "This is all happening so fast. but I will always love you no matter where you go." Bruno turned to Caroline, pain reflected in his eyes. "I don't want to go, Mom," he protested, his voice cracking with emotion. But deep down, he knew he was fighting against forces much greater than himself. As Daniel began making calls to finalize Bruno's departure, Caroline felt a sense of helplessness. She reached out to Bruno, pulling him into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry this is happening," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You mean everything to me." Bruno hugged her back, feeling their bond in that single moment, realizing that while he was being forced away, the love they shared would never fade. "I'll come back for you, Mom," he promised, determination flickering in his eyes. As days went by, Bruno prepared for his departure, but the thought of leaving Caroline haunted him. The morning of his flight arrived, the atmosphere thick with unspoken words and last chances. At the airport, Caroline stood with Bruno, desperately holding on to the moments that would soon become memories. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself," she said, feeling the weight of her heart in her throat. "And remember, my love for you will never change." "Mom, I don't want to leave you," Bruno replied, his voice thick with emotion. "This isn't how it's supposed to be." As he walked toward the boarding gate, he turned back one last time, locking eyes with Caroline. "I'll find a way back to you," he vowed, a promise that lingered in the air like an unbroken thread between them. With a heavy heart, Caroline watched him go, knowing that the distance would be hard, but the love they shared would endure, no matter the miles separating them. And as Bruno stepped onto the plane, he felt a part of him was left behind, tethered to the woman he loved. He would fight to come back, to reclaim their bond and redefine their love, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. As Bruno reached his destination abroad, a mix of excitement and homesickness swirled within him. The bustling campus was alive with energy, but he felt a constant tug toward the memories of his mother, Caroline. Late at night, in his new dorm room, he'd often pick up his phone, yearning to hear her voice. "Hey, Mom," he said one evening, his voice soft and full of longing. "Hi, Bruno," Caroline replied, her voice instantly soothing his restless heart. "How are you settling in?" "It's different here. It's nice, but I miss you," he admitted. The familiar warmth enveloped him with the memory of their closeness. "Just remember, I'm always a call away," Caroline reassured, her tone gentle, yet filled with an underlying tension that always seemed to bubble between them. "You'll find your rhythm." As they spoke, the intimacy of their previous relationship simmered close to the surface. Bruno's thoughts wandered, and he found himself whispering, "Sometimes I think about you, about us." A thrill shot through him, mixing excitement and guilt. Caroline paused, feeling the tension curl in her stomach. "Bruno," she said softly, "you need to focus on your studies and meeting new friends. Maybe getting a girlfriend would help?" "Mom, it's not that easy," he said with a sigh. But deep down, he sensed she was right. The urge he felt for her remained intense, but he knew that living in those feelings wouldn't lead anywhere good. "Just give it a try," she encouraged, her voice soothing yet firm. "You need someone your own age. It could help you, chill out a bit." With Caroline's words lingering in his mind, Bruno made an effort to engage more with those around him. He explored campus life, joining clubs, attending parties, and slowly opening himself to new friendships. That's when he met Annabelle, a girl from his department with bright laughter and a vibrant spirit. Annabelle was everything Bruno needed to distract himself from his feelings for Caroline. They quickly developed a connection, sharing late-night study sessions and coffee dates filled with easy conversation. Bruno found himself laughing more, forgetting for moments the weight of his past. As weeks turned into months, his life began to shift. The intense longing he felt for Caroline started to fade, transforming into fond memories rather than burning desires. Bruno and Annabelle's relationship blossomed, filled with innocent kisses and comforting hugs. He learned to embrace the thrill of being young and in love, slowly allowing himself to heal. Meanwhile, Caroline focused on rebuilding her own life back home. With Bruno's departure, the weight of their past began to lift, allowing her to reconnect with Daniel. Their discussions, once heavy with confrontation, grew lighter. They began navigating their family dynamics anew, embracing the space Bruno's absence created for healing. I'm proud of him, Caroline said one evening as they shared a quiet dinner together. He's really trying to move on. Daniel nodded, a sense of relief washing over him. And you're both finding your way. That's what matters, he replied, reaching for her hand, intertwining their fingers as a promise of renewed commitment. Back with Bruno, life began to feel less heavy. He still called Caroline, but now their conversations felt different. While there was still affection, it was now filled with encouragement, laughter, and fond reminiscences, not the intensity it once held. "Mom, I might take Annabelle to a concert next week," Bruno announced during one of their phone calls, excitement palpable in his voice. "That sounds great. Just have fun and enjoy being young," Caroline replied, her heart swelling with pride. As Bruno and Annabelle explored their relationship, the love he felt for his mother shifted from desperation to gratitude. He recognized the beauty in his upbringing while embracing the new life he was crafting for himself. Eventually, Bruno realized that stepping away had not only given him space, but it also allowed both him and Caroline to heal from the complexities of their earlier bond. As months passed, Bruno thrived in his new environment, becoming more confident and independent. And finally, with both the distance and newfound relationships, Caroline and Daniel found the chance to rebuild their marriage, stronger and more united than before. Their shared love for Bruno became a bond that tied them together, supporting his journey as they embraced their own. It was a new beginning for their family, promising growth, healing, and the power of love in all its forms.